January 2026, a watershed moment in international relations. The United States military operation that seized Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and transported him to New York for trial sends shockwaves through the global south and exposes the fragile fiction of a rules-based world order. For the global south, and especially for a country like Zimbabwe, which has itself weathered decades of Western sanctions and interventionist rhetoric, this act is seen not merely as law enforcement. It is a flagrant violation of the bedrock principles that hold the international system together: sovereignty, non-intervention, and the peaceful settlement of disputes. This is our analysis. Chapter 1. International Law and Jurisprudence. Article 2, Paragraph 4 of the United Nations Charter is unambiguous. It prohibits the use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state. The abduction of a sitting head of state without the consent of his government is a textbook violation of this foundational norm. The principle of sovereign equality, enshrined in Article 2, Paragraph 1, has been trampled. The United States has effectively acted as prosecutor, judge, and executioner, bypassing the Venezuelan judiciary and any international legal process. No valid exception under Article 51 exists. Drug trafficking allegations, however serious, do not constitute an armed attack that would justify a military incursion. This is not self-defense. This is unilateral enforcement. The Trump administration has framed the operation as a law enforcement mission rather than an act of war. This deliberate blurring of categories, using military force to execute a domestic arrest warrant, creates a dangerous precedent. It allows powerful states to bypass the ordinary channels of extradition and mutual legal assistance. International law experts are unanimous in their rejection of this conflation. A criminal indictment alone does not provide authority to use military force to depose a foreign government. For Zimbabwe and other post-colonial states, the message is unmistakable. The West still regards itself as above the law. International law is now revealed as a political interpretative tool, wielded by the strong against the weak. It undermines the very notion of a rules-based order that the global South has struggled for generations to uphold. Chapter 2. Military Implications. The military dimensions of this operation reveal a calculated demonstration of United States unilateral power. The ability to project force deep into Latin America with impunity sends a chilling message to every nation in the global South. Regional security architecture lies in ruins. The Inter-American Treaty of Reciprocal Assistance, a cornerstone of hemispheric cooperation, has been shattered. The United States acted without consulting its neighbors, revealing that collective defense is an illusion when Washington decides to act. Leaders in Iran, North Korea, and Russia, they now face a terrifying calculus. If the United States can abduct a sitting president, who is safe? This prompts a dangerous escalation in personal security measures and more aggressive military posturing across the globe. Behind the headlines lies a sophisticated, multi-domain operation. United States cyber operations disrupted Venezuelan air defense and communication networks in the hours before the physical raid. This blurs the line between armed attack and covert action, a dangerous precedent. The success of the raid relied on signals intelligence and human intelligence from within Venezuela's own security apparatus. This reveals deep divisions within the Venezuelan state, a vulnerability that the United States ruthlessly exploited. The operation may be a field test for the United States low-visibility, high-impact doctrine. Swift, deniable strikes against high-value targets. Without triggering a full-scale war, military doctrine has been redefined. Chapter 3. Economic Impact. The economic consequences are catastrophic and far-reaching. With Venezuela's head of state removed and the government in disarray, oil production, already at historic lows, faces complete paralysis. This triggers hyperinflation and humanitarian catastrophe. The United States is freezing all Venezuelan state assets abroad and pressuring SWIFT to cut off remaining financial links. Economic strangulation is not a side effect. It is the strategy, but the damage extends far beyond Venezuela's borders. Commodity price volatility will ripple through global markets, affecting oil-importing countries across Africa and Asia. Zimbabwe, dependent on stable energy supplies, faces immediate economic pressure. The spectacle of a sovereign government being overthrown by force makes investors wary. Capital will flee from any country perceived as being in the crosshairs of Washington. The Global South faces a new era of investment deterrence. In response, countries like Zimbabwe are accelerating de-dollarization efforts. Reserves are shifting from dollars into yuan, euro, and gold. The petrodollar's grip on the Global South is loosening, a historic realignment. Many in the Global South believe the real goal is controlling Venezuela's vast oil and mineral wealth. This perception fuels anti-Western sentiment and strengthens arguments for nationalizing resource sectors. The resource capture narrative will define the next decade. The economic order has been destabilized. Chapter 4. Diplomatic and International Response. The diplomatic response reveals a fractured world. Uganda, as chair of the non-aligned movement, has categorically condemned the act of aggression. Zimbabwe, a member of the Group of Friends in defense of the United Nations Charter, joined Eritrea, China, and Russia in denouncing United States unilateralism. The African Union expressed grave concern and called for restraint, a cautious condemnation reflecting the delicate balance many African states must strike between principle and pragmatism. Principle often loses. Latin America is polarized. Left-leaning governments, Brazil, Colombia, Chile, Mexico, condemned the operation. Right-wing administrations, Argentina, Ecuador, welcomed it. The region fractures along ideological lines. Europe speaks in doublespeak. Germany's chancellor called the legal assessment complex. Other European leaders offered tepid criticism, revealing a tension between upholding international law and not alienating Washington. Principle bows to power. The United Nations Security Council faces deadlock. Any resolution condemning the operation will be vetoed by the United States. But the debate itself will highlight the erosion of the Council's authority. United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres warned that the operation sets a dangerous precedent and called for full respect of international law. Yet the Council cannot act. The United Nations' credibility as a guardian of international law is severely compromised. If the Security Council cannot restrain a permanent member from violating the Charter's core principles, the entire multilateral system is weakened. From the Global South emerges a counter-narrative. Neo-colonial framing dominates discourse. This is 19th century gunboat diplomacy, dressed in 21st century military technology. Decades of decolonization rhetoric, undermined in a single operation. The multilateral order has been fractured. Chapter 5. Geopolitical Forecasts. What comes next? In the short term, 6 to 18 months, Latin America will polarize further. Left-wing governments will harden their anti-United States stance. Right-wing governments will align more closely with Washington. The region becomes a battlefield of competing ideologies. Multilateral norms erode rapidly. The United Nations and regional organizations appear increasingly irrelevant. States rely more on bilateral and minilateral arrangements. Anti-American sentiment spikes across the Global South, complicating diplomatic and commercial relations. In the medium term, 2 to 5 years, a counter-intervention bloc emerges, led by Russia and China, including Iran, Zimbabwe, and Venezuela. This bloc institutionalizes security and economic cooperation aimed at resisting Western coercion. The multipolar world accelerates. Resource nationalism intensifies. Fear of external takeover drives resource-rich countries to tighten state control over extractive industries. Global supply chains face disruption. The era of unfettered resource extraction ends. In the long term, 5 years and beyond, if the United States faces no meaningful consequences, other powers will emulate this practice. Heads of state will no longer be safe on their own soil. Extraterritorial abduction becomes normalized. The Global South increasingly looks to Beijing and Moscow as alternative centers of power. Western hegemony enters irreversible decline. The unipolar moment, if it ever truly existed, is definitively over. From the perspective of Zimbabwe and the global South, this moment represents both a crisis and an opportunity. A crisis because the rules-based order has been exposed as a facade. An opportunity because the global South can now build alternative structures of cooperation and mutual respect. Structures built not on the power of force, but on the force of principle. The West still regards itself as above the law. International law is a political interpretative tool wielded by the strong against the weak. But the South is rising. This has been a documentary credit, produced by EPZ at TAC 26, Sovereignty Under Siege, a global South perspective on the Maduro abduction, April 2026.